Well, good evening and welcome back to Wednesday night Bible study. I'm glad to be back in town. We had a wonderful vacation, but there's no place like home. And I'm glad to be able to sit down with you tonight. And let's go back into our Bible study, looking tonight at the book of John, chapter 9. And we're going to go for the next 2 weeks in the book of John, so follow with me as I begin reading. As Jesus was passing by, he saw a man who was blind from the day of his birth. "Rabbi," his disciples said to him, "who was it who sinned that he was born blind, this man or his parents?" "It was neither he nor his parents who sinned," answered Jesus, "but it happened that in him there might be a demonstration of what God can do. We must do the works of him who sent me while day lasts. The night is coming when no man is able to work. So long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." I want us to know that this is the only miracle in the Gospels in which the sufferer is said to have been afflicted from birth. In the book of Acts, we find 2 people that suffered from birth, but this is the only time in any of the Gospels we find a person who has had their problems since the day that they were born. And this man must have been a well-known character because it seems as if all of the disciples knew about him. And when the disciples saw him, they used the opportunity to put to Jesus a problem which Jewish thought had always had to deal with and was deeply concerned, and which even today is still a problem. The Jews, as we're pretty much aware, always connect suffering and sin. And they worked on the assumption that whenever there was suffering, sin wasn't either far behind or far ahead. So they asked Jesus their question. "This man," they said, "is blind. Is his blindness due to his own sin or to the sin of his parents?" Well, that to me is the silliest question. How could the blindness possibly be due to his own sin when he had been blind from birth? And to that question, the theologians have given 2 answers, and I'm not even going to bother with just waving at one of them, because some of them had this strange notion of prenatal sin. They actually believed that a person could begin to sin while still in the womb. And that's all we're going to say there, because I happen to think that's ludicrous. The alternative answer to this was that the person's affliction was due to the sin of his parents. The idea that children inherit the consequences of their parents' sin is deeply woven into the fabric of the Old Testament. Remember the words, "I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and the 4th generation." It must never be forgotten that none of us lives only to ourselves, and none of us die only to ourselves. When a person sins, that person sets in motion a whole series of consequences, and those consequences have no end. They just continue on and on and on. So in this passage, there are 2 great principles we want to look at. Jesus doesn't try to explain the connection of sin and suffering. He says that this man's affliction came to him so that he would have an opportunity of showing what God can do. Now, we need to know that for John, for the writer of John, miracles are always a sign of God's glory and God's power. The writers of the other Gospels had differing points of view and regarded them as a demonstration of the compassion and the care of Jesus. When Jesus looked on the hungry crowd, he had compassion upon them in the book of Mark, because, as he said, they reminded him of a sheep not having a shepherd. When the leper came along, desperate to be cleansed, the scripture in Mark tells us that Jesus was moved with compassion. And it's often pointed out that in this 4th gospel is quite different from the others. But I'm not sure that it is. There's no real contradiction here. It's simply 2 different ways of looking at the same thing. And at its core, at the heart, is the supreme truth that the power and the glory of God lies in his compassion and that he never ever so much more fully reveals his glory as when he reveals to us his care and his pity. But there's another sense in which a man's suffering shows what God can do. Affliction, sorrow, disappointment, pain, loss, always are opportunity for displaying the grace of God. First, it enables the sufferer to show God in action. When trouble and disaster fall on any of us, those who do not know God, they may well collapse. But when trouble and disaster fall on a person who walks with God, that brings out the strength and the beauty and the nobility and the endurance which are within a man's heart when God lives there. It's when life hits us with a terrible blow that we can show the world how a Christian can live and thrive. Any kind of suffering that we have is an opportunity to demonstrate the glory and power of God in our own lives. And second, by helping those who are in trouble or who are in pain, we can demonstrate to other people the power of God. When we invest ourselves to help those in trouble, in distress, whatever affliction, God is using us as the conduit by which he sends his help into the lives of his people. To help a fellow human being in need is to make known the power and the glory of God. And it shows to everyone just exactly what God is like. And Jesus goes on to say that he and all of his followers must do God's work while there is yet time to do it. God gave to us, gave to humanity the day for work, and he gave the night for rest. The day comes to an end, and so does the time for work. For Jesus, it was so true that he had to press on quickly with God's work in the day, for the night, the darkness of the cross, lay close ahead. But that's true for each one of us. We are given only so much time. And whatever we are to do must be done within that framework of it. We should never, ever put things off until another time, because we know full well another time just may not come. The Christian's duty is to fill the time that we have, and God has given us that time. And not one of us knows how much time we'll have, but we need to fill it with service to God and service to those around us. So let's look now at the miracle that Jesus worked with this man who was blind from birth. When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made clay from the spittle. And he smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." So he went away and washed. And he came, able to see. So the neighbors and those who formerly knew him by sight and knew that he was a beggar said, "Is this not the man who sat begging?" Some said, "It is he." Others said, "It is not he, but it is someone like him." And the man himself said, "I am he." "How then," they said to him, "have your eyes been opened?" The man, he said, they called Jesus, made clay and smeared it on my eyes and said to me, "Go to the pool of Siloam and wash." So I went and washed, and sight came to me. And they said to him, "Where is the man you are talking about?" And he said, "I don't know." Now, this is one of two miracles in which Jesus is said to have used spittle to effect a cure. The other is the miracle of the deaf stammerer over in the book of Mark. And the use of spittle seems so strange to us, and it's kind of repulsive and it's very unhygienic, but in the ancient world, it was something that was quite common. The fact is that Jesus took the methods and customs of his time and he used them. Jesus was a wise physician. He had to gain the confidence of his patient. It was not so much that he believed in these things, but he wanted to kindle an expectation by doing what the patient would expect a doctor to do. After all, to this very day, the effectiveness of any medicine or any protocol of treatment depends at least as much on the patient's faith as it is in the treatment or the drugs itself. So after anointing the man's eyes with spittle, Jesus sent him to wash in the pool of Siloam. And the pool of Siloam was the place where the conduit from the Virgin's fountain issued in the city. Now the Virgin's fountain was outside of Jerusalem, and that's where the water came from. And it ran into a conduit and came into the center of Jerusalem, into an open air basin that was big. It was 20 by 30 feet. And that's how the pool got its name. It was called Siloam because that is the word which means sent, because the water had been sent through that conduit from outside of the city into that pool. So Jesus sent the man to wash in the pool, and the man washed, and he saw. And now comes the inevitable problem. It was the Sabbath day on which Jesus had made the clay and healed the man. Undoubtedly, Jesus had broken the Sabbath law, as the scribes had worked it out, and done so, in fact, in 3 different ways. First of all, by making clay, he had been guilty of working on the Sabbath when even the simplest acts were deemed to constitute work, and that was forbidden. Secondly, it was forbidden to heal on the Sabbath. Medical attention could be given only if life was in actual danger. It was forbidden to set a broken limb. If a man's hand or foot was broken, it could not have even cold water poured over it. Clearly, the man who was born blind was in no danger of life. Therefore, Jesus broke the Sabbath when he healed him. And then the third reason, it was quite definitely laid down as to spittle, it is not lawful to put it so much as upon the eyelids. So they brought the man, and they examined him, and when he was asked his opinion of Jesus, he gave it clearly and without hesitation. He said that Jesus was a prophet. Now, in the Old Testament, a prophet was often tested by the signs that he could produce. Moses guaranteed to Pharaoh that he really was God's messenger by doing signs and wonders that impressed everybody. Elijah proved that he was a prophet by doing things that the prophets of Baal could not do. And it's no doubt the man's thoughts as they questioned him were running along these lines, thinking about these things when he said that in his opinion, Jesus was a prophet. So we leave this tonight with the knowledge of one thing for sure. Whatever else, this was a very brave man. He knew quite well what the Pharisees thought of Jesus. And he knew quite well, very well, that if he came out on Jesus' side, he was certain to be excommunicated. But he took a deep breath and he made his statement. And he took his stand. And it was as if he said, I am bound to believe in him. I am bound to stand by him. Why? Because of everything that he has done for me. And then if we step back from this man and listen to those words and think about our lives, and as we close, I want you to think, what has Jesus done for you that nobody else could do? He is our great example. The man is. Jesus had done for him. Then the man stood up for Jesus. That's what we're to do as disciples of Christ. We're to be followers, and we're to be those cheering Jesus on. It's good to be with you tonight. I'll be so glad when we can eat dinner together. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning. Stay cool, everyone.